Thomas Paine did not stay buried. 10 years after his death, men came to his grave before daylight. They opened the earth, lifted out the coffin, and carried his bones away. That party's strange enough. But the man who took him was William Cobbett, one of Paine's loudest enemies, later one of his admirers. Cobbett said he was bringing Paine home to England. He said there would be a proper monument. Instead, the bones crossed the Atlantic. They became political cargo, then a private embarrassment, then relics, then rumors. And somewhere in all of that, Thomas Paine disappeared, piece by piece. Thomas Paine died in 1809. By then, he was not only famous, he was inconvenient. He had written Common Sense, one of the clearest arguments for American independence. He had defended revolution, attacked hereditary power, rejected organized religion, and insisted on reason even when it cost him almost everything. Paine was a deist, not an atheist, but in the world around him, that distinction did not save him. Before he died, he worried about what people might do with his death. That says a lot. He asked to be buried in a friend's graveyard in New York. That request was refused, so he's buried in New Rochelle on a farm given to him by the state of New York after the Revolution. Even then, people could not leave him alone. A plain headstone was placed over the grave. Visitors chipped pieces from it. Some called that vandalism. Others called it admiration. Either way, the stone marking Paine's grave started vanishing before the bones did. In 1819, William Cobbett decided Paine had lain there long enough. Cobbett was an English reformer, but years earlier he had attacked Paine in print. Later, he changed his mind. He came to see Paine as a giant. In a public letter, Cobbett complained that Paine was lying in a little hole in America. He said Paine belonged to England. He said England should honor him. Then he stopped writing and did something much stranger. His party left New York in the middle of the night. They reached New Rochelle around daybreak. They opened the grave. They took the entire coffin. Cobbett said that the remains were going to England. He said a tomb would be raised. But I have trouble with that explanation, because this was not a family reburial. It was not a quiet act of respect. It was a political theft dressed up as tribute, and people nearby understood that. One later account said if the proper authorities had known in time, they would have stopped it. The bones were packed for the voyage. On the ship Elizabeth, some Quaker passengers reportedly learned what Cobbett had brought aboard, and they left the ship. That detail feels almost too human. No thunder, no curse. Just people deciding they did not want to cross the ocean with the stolen bones in the hold. Cobbett landed at Liverpool on November 21, 1819. From there, the story moves towards Manchester, or tries to. A later Manchester account says Cobbett intended to bring Paine's bones into the city, but he only got as far as Salford. It may be that officials were nervous, and that would make sense. This was shortly after the Porterloo Massacre. Radical politics were raw. The government was tense. The public mood was dangerous. A dead revolutionary in a box was not just a corpse. It was a symbol, and symbols can start fires. Cobbett's grand plan failed in the most ordinary way possible. Attention moved on. King George III died in 1820. Cobbett chased a seat in Parliament, and Paine's bones were stored away. For years, they were less a national monument than an awkward object in someone's house. There are accounts that Cobbett occasionally showed them. One boy visiting Normandy Farm reportedly asked whether Cobbett really kept the bones of Tom Paine, the infidel. Cobbett took him upstairs and showed him. That is the part that stops me. Not a tomb, not a memorial, a man upstairs showing a child the bones of a revolutionary like something kept in the cupboard. Cobbett died in 1835. His debts brought his effects to auction, and this is where the trail begins to split. One account said a box is pointed out as containing Paine's remains, but the auctioneer refused to sell it. Another account said the bones passed to a nurse in Cobbett's family. Another said they went to a gardener. Then there was a receiver, then Benjamin Tilley, then London, then back towards Normandy Farm, then somewhere else again. The clean chain of custody collapses, names appear, rooms change, boxes move. People remember pieces, people forget the rest. That is usually how history gets lost, not in one dramatic disappearance, in a line of people who do not want responsibility for the thing in the box. By the middle of the century, the story had become grotesque. There were reports of porcelain jar marked as Paine's bones, but supposedly only a few bones were inside. There was a claim that bones were seen in a box in a Guildford corn merchant's house. There was another story that a bag of bones was found after Tilly's death, that the bones were sold to a rag and bone collector, and that the person selling them did not realize they were human. Maybe, but that explanation is very clean, maybe too clean, because by then other pieces had already separated: a skull, a right hand, hair, a portion of the brain. Paine was not lost all at once. He was divided. One of the strangest trails leads to Reverend Robert Ansley. A bookseller later said Ansley claimed to possess Paine's skull and right hand. Ansley's daughter remembered bones in the family's possession when she was a child, but she said they were lost during the family's moves. Another account claimed the skull and ham had been purchased from rooms connected to an auctioneer. Moncure Conway, who tried to track the remains, believed the skull may still exist, somewhere in London. He noted that Paine's skull supposedly had J.P. Cobbett's name written on it, or scratched into it. That detail is almost worse because it is so practical. If the skull had ever turned up, it might not look like a mystery. It might look like an old medical specimen, an anatomical object, something pushed to the back of a shelf, except for a name on the bones. Some relics were still traceable in Conway's time: 2 locks of Paine's hair, a darkened portion of brain about the size of a fist kept under glass. A note from Tilly said he had taken hair and portion of brain from Paine's skull at Cobbett's house in January of 1833. There is no graceful way to say that. The man who wrote Common Sense became a set of fragments: hair and paper, brain under glass, bones in boxes, a skull and a rumor. And at New Rochelle, a grave that no longer held what people thought it held. A monument was eventually raised at New Rochelle, but the damage had already been done. The grave had been opened, the coffin was taken, the remains scattered through private hands. People argue over what happened. Some wanted a public funeral, some wanted a monument, some wanted the matter buried quietly because the whole thing had become embarrassing. That is the blunt truth of it. Paine was treated badly in life for what he believed, then in death he was treated like property. A symbol when useful, a burden when not. A relic when someone wanted a story, and finally, a mystery when the paperwork failed. The ordinary explanation is neglect. A little politics, a little greed, a little reverence. A lot of people handling something that should have left in the ground. But the unresolved part is sharper than that. Conway believed Paine's skull might still be somewhere in London, possibly in a doctor's office, possibly in a collection, possibly marked with Cobbett's name. That is the image that stays with me. Not the empty grave, not the failed monument. A skull on a shelf, stripped of context, waiting for someone to notice the scratched name and understand what they are holding. Thomas Paine.